because he defined first principles. And that was a given. In the Revolutionary era, first principles was just known. That's the people acting. Now, we don't have to act today through violence. We can use first principles, and that's what I'm doing with the National Initiative. I go entirely around the government. And we don't have to have 9 conventions. We have the technology today to ask all Americans, do you want to be empowered? And if we have the majority of the people who voted in the last presidential election, then of course we become the law of the land. And this is not, nobody's laid a glove on this in any of the major universities, and I would challenge any constitutional scholar to debate me on this subject. But I've gone on with my monologue. Maybe, Mr. White, you want to ask another question or raise another point?
Well, I think I think one of the important questions that needs to be asked is that, and George Ripley brought it up. Okay, right now, of course, the Congress has no interest in touching this issue with, as you say, a 10-foot pole. But if they start to see some real momentum here, and this initiative in Mass passes, and maybe Oregon passes, and all of a sudden it's really gaining some headway, then what's to prevent the Congress themselves saying, okay, we'll do a new investigation ourselves, okay? And we know
you're too smart. You're too smart.
Right. We know what's going to happen with that.
And I'm not blowing smoke at you. You really here. If I were in Congress and were on the other side of this issue, or if I was president and wanted to kill this issue like Obama's been doing, I would turn around and say, hey, these guys are going to get a Citizens Commission going. We better do something about it, because we want a government commission, because we appoint political leaders who we know will act properly. And so what the government will do, if it looks like we're getting traction, they'll go for a government commission. Oh, a good idea. These citizens are just doing a good idea, but we don't trust citizens. We'll appoint our own commission. Now, that's going to be an interesting process. I would maintain that once you get the visibility with the constituency of the nation on this issue, with several different states, and then this ploy of the government takes place, then we would obviously engage that ploy. And because, look, we already had, they tried to appoint Henry Kissinger once. Maybe they'll try to get him again in there. And Kissinger can't go abroad because he would be subpoenaed. Henry Kissinger can't travel abroad, because what would happen to Henry is what happened to Pinochet in Britain. So I've got a little segue against, but they'll appoint politicians who act properly. That means they'll cover them. There's an unwritten code between the Democrats, Republicans, and this would be the code if any political party got that high, because it's a corrupting process. And the unwritten code is, we'll investigate you and damage you enough so we get elected, but we won't take it to any extreme, unless you're caught stuffing money in your jacket. But we won't take it to any extreme. And that's the code, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And I could give you historic examples on that score that just drive that home. And of course, let me drive one thing home about political parties. In this country, you cannot get to the Supreme Court unless you're bought into by a party. You cannot become president unless you got a major party. You cannot get into the Congress, or basically have a significant role into the Congress, if you're not party to a party, Democrat, Republican. And yet, in the Constitution of the United States, there's not one word about the party system. And at the time, our founding fathers knew, and they called it factions, and they knew they were a corrupting influence on the process.
They did. George Washington himself said, by the way, George Washington,
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
So Jefferson was forming a party. They had hired publicists that were tearing each other apart, and it was so angry, it angered George Washington so much that he didn't want to run. And so Hamilton prevailed on him to run, and of course Jefferson was not there in the second term. And then when George found out how scurrilous Jefferson had been towards him, he did not talk with him in the last 2 years of his administration. So the corrupting influence was already there. And of course, keep in mind that Thomas Jefferson would not have been elected president in 1800 if we hadn't had 3/8 of a person having a vote because they're black. Because if you took away the black vote, John Adams got reelected. Interesting process, isn't it? Another Massachusetts, his son, John Quincy Adams, made the statement that the Civil War, which is the only way you could get rid of slavery, the Civil War was the last battle of the Revolutionary War. What a prescient statement that was by that great American. So there's just a lot of interesting history out there, and Massachusetts has played such a significant role, and that's why it's such a pleasure for me, born and raised in Springfield, Massachusetts, French-Canadian immigrants, to come back here and say that, hey, Massachusetts is our flagship. And now the question is, can we raise the $300,000 plus money it takes to do the job? If we can't, that's okay. We got next year. And there could be, and of course we're a day late and dollar short because we just made it under the wire on August 3rd. We got it approved by the Attorney General, Coakley. And so, and what's interesting is though this process has never been done before and is somewhat unique, it's already been agreed to by the Legislative Council of California, which is illegal. They're the ones that would lay into it if it were illegal. And also the Legislative Council of State of Oregon, and now by the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts. So we're in pretty good legal shape that we can now take this to other states and tweak it a little bit and then file.
I find we have some great competition. As you said, after the Civil War, they gave corporations the rights of an individual. They call it human rights for the which I found out it was actually a clerk that implemented that ruling, and then it later was claimed as precedent by the courts.
It was a case. It was a case in I think 1888. Do you remember it?
Yeah, Dartmouth. Wasn't it Dartmouth?
No, not Dartmouth. It was
Santa Clara County.
Santa Clara County, that's right.
Santa Clara County. And what it is you're quite right. I don't know if it was a clerk or not, but they slipped it into a footnote.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, corporation leaders, the robber barons of the period looking at this footnote, my God, well, let's build on that. And they did. And to the point now, we're at the extreme where the Supreme Court with Citizens United has said that corporations can now pour money into a presidential campaign. It's interesting, a friend of mine, some people were asking me to run again, that's a whole other issue. But we looked into it, and for some reason the FEC has not honored this corporate money. So I haven't done the research to really see what's going on. But clearly, you can aggressively take a stand. We're going to take corporate money, and some have been doing it because the Supreme Court has ruled. Now, whether the FEC catches up with that ruling, that's a whole other issue.
I like to say, I thought George's idea of a $10 campaign to get 10,000 supporters was brilliant. If there was unity amongst the people that are aware of wanting a 9/11 commission, but again, the overwhelming control of people's minds, the fractionating the movement, the architects and engineers doing their thing, the New York City people are doing their thing. We couldn't get that 10,000 because there wasn't enough unity within the people that would like to see a new investigation. And I'm so glad you're willing to give it another year if we don't succeed in Massachusetts, because I am beginning to have my doubts. But because of the money so far and the how many there are of us to really make this happen.
And we got a taste of that in Boston. When I first off, the 9/11 Truth Movement was very happy I came into the scene because I'm not tagged as a conspiracy person. I've just got my own credentials. They saw those credentials in the presidential election, or they saw that with my background when I was a senator. So they were happy I came on the scene because I added a new voice, a fresher voice, so to speak. But yet, one day after that, I was interviewed in Detroit, Michigan, and this interviewer was trying to tag me as a conspiracy nut. Man, I crawled his frame and then some with a pitchfork, and he backed away real hard. And the position I take is real simple. George is very informed on this, and I know you are too, and I know you are, about what's been going on in the last 10 years with the 9/11 Truth Movement. What I've done in the last 10 years and then some is concentrate on direct democracy. And why I was able to think of this device is because of my foundation and knowledge in constitutional matters for direct democracy. But as far as I'm concerned, I come to the table now not trying to play catch up with all this wonderful work that's been done by scientists. It's to just say, hey, I have an actionable plan. We can now take all this work you've done and put it into the hands of the people where they can do something about it. And those are my credentials, and that's as far as I want to go. When people want to argue with me, in fact, when I hear people in these talk shows, oh, this is what happened or that's what happened, I don't want to go there, because when you're in a talk show, all the people know this guy, he said, I'm a fireman. Like one guy, I'm a fire chief, and I saw half of Building 7 destroyed before it came down. Well, the guy's either illiterate, needs a new set of glasses, or he's a fraud, he's a flake. We don't know that. But with all due respect, if he's a fireman, then let him put out fires in his own communities. And I was asking somebody today, could we do it which would be the election of 2013. But you see, we got to keep in mind, this is a long process. This has got to all jump on the table.